Hey everyone, it's Lynette, and this video is all about the most anticipated young adult books of 2018. So I have a lot of books on this list of books that I'm excited that is coming out in the next several months. I'm only going to go through, I think I have through June or July, and then I'll do another one of these videos in like the middle of summer for the next half of the year because a lot of the new releases for fall and next winter aren't available yet. So I'm just really going to do the first 6 months of the year, and then later on in the year I will make another video of the second half. So January seems like a really good month for new releases coming out, and I have several books on my list. The first one is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This book is about fairies, and I chose this book to put on my highly anticipated list because it reminds me a lot of Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's about fairies and humans, and this girl named Jude, and she wants to be a part of the fairy world because her two sisters were taken there a long time ago, but there's a cruel High Lord and he doesn't want her to be because she's human, and there's a lot of discord between the fairy realm and the human realm. So again, I get a lot of that A Court of Thorns and Roses vibe, so I'm really looking forward to seeing another book about fairies and if I like it just as much. This next book I want to read so bad, and I requested it on NetGalley, and for some reason I got denied, and every other book that I've requested so far on NetGalley I've gotten approved for except this one, and this is the one that I was truly so excited for, so I'm so disappointed, but I requested it on a couple other sites, so I hope that I get to read it before it comes out because it sounds so good, and that is The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. It sounds so dark and twisted, and it's kind of maybe like an Alice in Wonderland, not retelling, but sort of has that vibe, that otherworldly vibe. 17-year-old Alice has this grandmother who writes these kind of dark, twisted fairy tales, and her grandmother dies in her estate called the Hazelwood. And then Alice's mother is stolen away by a character in one of Alice's grandmother's fairy tales and taken to this world called Hinterland, which is where the fairy tales are based out of. So Alice has to find some book nerds that are cult classic fans of Alice's grandmother's stories and kind of pair up with them to find out how to get to Hinterland and how to rescue her mother. Her mother leaves her only one message before she is stolen away, and that is stay away from the Hazelwood. But she knows in order to retrieve her mother, she's going to have to go there. So this book sounds so incredible. I want to read it so much. So I really hope that the other sites that I've requested this arc from approve me and I can read it and review it for you before it comes out next month. The next book that I'm super excited for that's coming out next month is called Everlist by Sarah Holland. This one, time is currency. So it kind of is a fantasy because it's in this fantasy type world, but it has this sci-fi kind of feel with the time being currency because I know that there's been several movies, sci-fi type of movies that came out that time was like your currency. I think Matt Damon or something was in one of them. I can't remember. Anyway, but this one sounds, has kingdoms and princes and kings and queens and every type of thing that you love about a fantasy book, but it also has this time being currency type of sci-fi feel. So this one sounds really intriguing. It has a really beautiful cover, so I'm really looking forward to reading it as well. This next book I don't know too much about apart from the Goodreads synopsis, and I don't want to know too much about it. I strictly picked this book because one of my favorite authors writes it, and that is Amy Kaufman, and the book is Unearthed. I loved so much. I loved Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So anything that Amy Kaufman comes out with and anything she writes, I'm going to read, and I'm sure I'm going to love it. But Unearthed is by Amy Kaufman. It's again a space age type of story. It talks about advanced technology and aliens and sci-fi type of goodness like that. So I'm really excited to see another book from Amy Kaufman set in this kind of outer space type of environment. The next book on my list for the month of January is sort of a different type of read for me, and I'm really curious to read it and really intrigued by it. But it's called Love, Hate, and Other Filters. This book is an own voices type of book, and I've never read anything like that before, but it's around this American-born 17-year-old Muslim American that she has to confront all this bigotry and hatred and Islamophobia. She's torn between what she wants and what her parents want. Her parents want her to go on to be a doctor and marry a traditional Muslim boy and things like that. And she wants to go to New York City and maybe pursue a relationship with this boy in her class who's not Muslim. And anyway, it just seems so, and then on top of all of that, there's this thing that happens in the real world, this tragedy, this crime that happens that makes her community so filled with bigotry and hate that she has to face that in this horrible reality that we're living in with all of this Islamophobia. So I'm really intrigued. I'm really excited to read this one. Like I said, this is typically out of my comfort zone, but I'm really excited to see what this has to offer. The next book on my list for January of 2018 is called The Forgotten Book. This is about a girl who finds this old book in a library, and she discovers that anything she writes in this book comes true. It's described as a Jane Austen inspired young adult tale, so I'm really intrigued by that. But that's all I really need to know about this book to know that I want to read it and it sounds interesting. This next book comes out in February, and it's called The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross. This one reminds me that if a fantasy novel and Divergent had a baby, it would be this book. Because this is another fantasy novel that's about kingdoms and queens and all that kind of stuff that we love about fantasy novels. But it's also sort of divergent-y in the fact that when you're born, you get to choose a talent of the 5 passions. There's art, music, dramatics, wit, and knowledge. And you get to choose one to study. And our heroine of the story, Brianna, decides to study knowledge. But on the summer solstice, when it's time to pick her passion, something goes wrong. She doesn't get to pick knowledge, or something happens, and she's left without I think they're called a patron. So she finds herself patronless. This book just sounds really intriguing, sort of a divergent twist on a fantasy novel. I think it sounds really, really good, and I'm excited to read it in the month of February. This next book has a beautiful cover, and it's what initially drew me in and made me interested in what it was about. And it's called Ink, Iron, and Glass by Gwendolyn Clare. I think it's her debut novel. That's such a beautiful name. I love that author's name, Gwendolyn Clare. But this is a historical fiction novel that takes place in 19th century Italy. It revolves around this girl named Elsa, and she is a certain person who can craft entirely new worlds with just a pen and paper, and this science is called scriptology. So it's just sort of a world of magic, it seems like, and supernatural, but it's set in 19th century Italy. So this is really intriguing. The cover is insanely gorgeous. So I'm really excited to read this author's debut novel. This next book is a sci-fi book in all of its sci-fi nerdiness glory. I cannot wait to read it. Again, it has another beautiful cover and a really creepy and eerie title. It's called Cadaver and Queen. And this is by Alyssa, and I'm going to butcher this last name, Quitney? I don't know. But this cover is gorgeous. The title is just eerie and creepy enough to have me intrigued. But this is about a medical student named Lizzie, and she is the first female medical student that's in this class full of males. She has to go above and beyond to prove herself and to prove her worth and to prove that she deserves to be in this program. And she stumbles across this faulty biomechanical. It's these cadavers that they use to practice medicine and surgeries and things on. And she discovers a faulty one. So she jumps at the chance to start to fix it. Only this biomechanical isn't like the other biomechanicals. This one seems to have feelings and self-awareness. And it really reminds me of like the hosts in Westworld, if you're familiar with that show. So it's sort of like a Frankenstein type of novel meets Westworld, and just beautiful sci-fi-ness. I cannot wait to read this one. It just sounds so creepy and so beautiful, and I'm so stoked to read this sci-fi novel. Now we are into the month of March and the new releases for the month of March, and the first book on my list I know nothing about, other than it's about pirates and pirate royalty, and I think it's sort of a historical fiction type of book, but that book is Pacifica by Kristen Simmons. And the only reason I picked this one is because I absolutely loved Kristen Simmons' debut series of Article 5. I think there was Article 5, Breaking Point, and then the last one was called 3. And it was a dystopian young adult series that I fell in love with, and I fell in love with her writing. So I'm really excited to see what she does with sort of a historical fiction type of piratey novel. And I'm all about the pirates. The Pirates of the Caribbean is like one of my all-time favorite franchise movies. So I'm really excited to read a novel about pirates, because I don't think that's something I've ever done before. Speaking of pirates, this next book sounds amazing as well, and it has a really, really cool cover, and it's called To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. And all you need to know about this one is it's a dark fairy tale retelling of The Little Mermaid. Do I need to say much else to make you want to read this one? Because that sounds amazing to me, in my opinion. This next book is the third book in a series that I am reading. The series is a study of in Charlotte by Brittany, I think it's Cavallaro. But the study of Charlotte was such an awesome young adult mystery type novel. It's about Charlotte Holmes, who is the great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Sherlock Holmes, and Jamie Watson, who is the great-great-great-grandson of Dr. Watson. So they solve crimes together, and the first novel was such a really cool, really fun read. I have yet to read the second one, and the book that comes out in March called The Case for Jamie is the third one. So I don't want to know anything about the third one until I read the second one. So, but that I know I want to read it because I love this series and I loved the first one, and I can't wait to read the second and third. This next novel that comes out in March as well is another historical fiction novel. I guess I have a lot of those on my list for the next year. But this one is called Blood, Water, Paint, and it's by Joy McAuliffe. And there is a trigger warning on this because I do believe that there is a rape scene. So if you have triggers with rape and sexual assault, then be aware that this book does cover those issues. But it's set in 17th century Rome, and this girl, I can't pronounce her name. I want to say Artemisia, but the main character's mother dies, which leaves her as a choice. She can either go to a convent to be a nun, or she can be left to a life of grinding paint pigment for her father. So she chooses to grind paint. But then she becomes one of Rome's most talented painters by the age of 17. But this is a world where women were treated very poorly and men took what they want from women. So she has a very traumatic scene with a man. And then she's left with another terrible choice. Does she live a life of silence, or does she tell the truth no matter what the personal cost it would be for her? So this sounds like a really interesting novel. It takes place in the past, but it also brings in some current issues that are happening in our world today. So I'm really interested to see how the author, binds these two worlds together. The next book that I'm super excited that is coming out next year in the month of March is called Obsidian by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. You guys know I'm a huge, huge fan of Illuminae, and the second book's called Gemina, so I am so excited to see how this story wraps up. I believe this is going to be the last novel. I really hope that it's not. I hope that the story continues because I'm such a huge fan of it. I recommend the book Illuminae to anybody who wants to read something new and fresh and different. Illuminae, like you probably already know, is told through sort of a different format. It's told through a series of text messages and journal entries and drawings, and the pages are just so aesthetically pleasing and aesthetically beautiful. So I'm really, really excited to see how this series wraps up, and I cannot wait to get my hands on Obsidian. And the final book that I'm excited to read in March is called Olivia Twist, and this is by Lori Langdon. And this seems to be a retelling of the classic Theo Oliver twist, but except with a female protagonist. So I'm really excited to see how this pans out. And again, it's another beautiful cover, and I'm just such a sucker for a gorgeous cover. The first book that comes out in April that I am excited to read is called Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. I'm really excited to read this. It's about this girl who's just this proper young lady. She's going to finishing school. She's learning how to be prim and proper, but then her mother goes missing, and apparently she goes missing in this town called New Reynes, I think it's called, and it's the so-called city of sin, where a proper lady would never be seen or step foot in, but she has to go find her mother. So this is just a really cool book. I don't know, that's really all I know about it, but I'm really intrigued. This next book is another historical fiction book, except I think with a little bit of a twist. It's called Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. If you read Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Slayer, or Vampire Hunter, I can't remember which one it was, but Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, you know that they took this historical fiction, they took some real events in history, and they put vampires in with it. That's what this seems to do, except it's with zombies and the Battle of Gettysburg. So I am such a sucker for a good twist on history novel. I'm a history buff myself, so I'm really excited to see if this gives me the same feeling that I had when I read Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. And the final book that comes out in April that I'm excited to read is called The Ash Princess, and it totally gives me Red Queen vibes, especially with the cover. But this just seems like your typical fantasy novel. There's this queen and her mother, or a princess rather, and her mother is murdered before her. She lives under these terrible conditions for most of her life, and so one day she just needs to have some revenge. So it's just a classic fantasy revenge tale, but I'm hoping that there's some surprises in it. We have now hit the month of May for new releases, and of course the first new release in May that I want to read is by Sarah J. Maas, and this is the first novella of the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and it's called A Court of Frost and Starlight. I don't think there's too much out there about this book yet, but other than it's just pretty much going to continue the story of the Night Court and Feyre and Rhysand. But it's a novella, and I guess it's the first of a couple novellas, but it's I think 400 pages long. So I don't know what Sarah J. Maas is thinking, because that's a book. That's not a novella. That is just straight up another book. But I'm not complaining at all. I'm not even mad about it. I would read 1,000,000 pages of this series. I love it so much. So I'm really excited to see this story continue. And if you have not read Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses, be sure to watch my review of it, which I think should already be posted. And if it is, I will post a link to that video down below. But it is a definite series that you should read if you have not read it already. The only other book I have for the month of May so far is a book by Jay Kristoff, and like I said, with Amy Kaufman, I absolutely loved Illuminae, which was by the both of them, so I'm sure anything that Jay Kristoff puts out there I'm going to love as well. And his new book is called Lifelike, which just sounds so sci-fi that I think I just have to read it. Like I said, I don't know a lot about this one yet either. I don't even think that there's a cover that has been released, but it's by Jay Kristoff and I love his writing style, so of course I'm going to read it. And now for the month of June, the book that I'm really excited coming out for June is called Dive Smack. Again, another gorgeous cover. This is by Dimitra Brodsky. I think I'm saying that right. But it's about this high school boy, and the only thing he can remember from the night that this fire burned his house down and killed his family was that he lit the match. He's this straight A student. He is captain of the diving team at his school. He has good friends. He's only one semester away from securing a college scholarship, so he's a good kid. But then he's assigned this family project at school, and it's bringing back all of these memories about the night that his family died. And he's wondering if he can trust anyone, including himself, because he just doesn't remember enough of that night. So I want to say, even though I don't know for sure, that this might delve into a little bit of mental illness, but I'm not sure. I can't say that for certain. But it sounds like he is having some mental blockage about what happened the night his parents were killed. And I don't think that he knows whether or not he did it or not. So I'm really kind of intrigued to read this book. I definitely want to find out if he lit the fire or if what happened. I'm intrigued. The only book that I have for the month of July is called The Unfortunates by Kim Liggett. This one has a lot of elements packed into it, and it just sounds really, really good. It's about this 17-year-old son. He's the son of a senator, so he's kind of high profile, and he's involved in this traffic accident. And my guess is that he lives and whoever he hit does not, so he commits pretty much, vehicular manslaughter. But because his dad is a senator, he essentially gets away with murder, and the accident is covered up. But he's dealing with all of this guilt, and so he's going on this cave excursion to the Appalachian Trail, where he's going to stage an accident where it looks like, I guess, he's going to die, and he's just going to run away and not come back just because he can't live with the guilt of what he's done. But before he has a chance to do that, the cave system collapses, and it traps him and 4 other teens from much less fortunate situations that he is in this cave. So they have to share their innermost secrets and fears, and it just seems like they might be on track to finding their way out, only to discover that there is something else in this cave with them, and they're not sure what it is. So that's a lot to pack into one book. I'm excited to see if it's messy or if it's kind of a cool telling, a cool story. So it just sounds really good, and the cover is just really creepy, and I'm really in love with the cover. So I'm excited to see what happens in this story. So like I said, that is all the new releases that I have on my list so far. Even the ones, in the month of May where I only have 2 books, or July I only have 1 book. There might be other releases coming out in those months that I just have not heard about or haven't been released yet. And I know fall is always a great time for new releases. And I don't know any books that are coming out in fall yet, but once I know what is coming out in fall, I will film this video again, probably 6 months from now, and tell you all of the releases that I'm excited about in fall. So that does it for what is happening in 2018 and what is on my most highly anticipated new release book list. Thank you so much for watching, and drop in the comments below what you're excited for, because maybe I've missed some new releases that I'll be excited to read as well. I'll see you later, guys. Bye.